If you have diabetes, and you love coffee with milk, the problem is usually not the coffee itself. The real issue is the morning routine that has felt so normal for so long that you stopped noticing it years ago. The order you pour it, the kind of milk you use, and when you drink it around breakfast, shape your morning numbers far more than most people realize. Stay with me, because near the end, I'm going to show you the simple 8-second habit that makes this whole routine easier to repeat without turning your life into one more health chore. By the end of this video, you'll know what milk to choose, when to drink it, what mistakes ruin the method, and how to test whether it helps your breakfast numbers. This is educational, not personal medical advice, but it will help you ask better questions and make better everyday choices. I'm Dr. Thomas Bennett. Let me start with Margaret. She was 66, frustrated, and honestly, a little sad over something that sounded small. Every morning, she made coffee the same way she always had. Hot coffee first, milk after, breakfast right away. And almost every morning, her blood sugar after breakfast climbed much higher than she wanted. She told me, "I've had coffee with milk for decades. Now I feel like I'm being told I have to give up one more thing I enjoy. Do I really have to stop?" That question matters, because so many people with diabetes fall into the same trap. They assume there are only two choices: black coffee they dislike, or coffee with milk that sends their breakfast numbers up. But in real life, the answer is usually sitting in the details they never tested. Here is the core idea of this video. This is not just a coffee problem. It is a routine problem. And that is good news, because routines can be adjusted. What matters most is not whether you can make the cup sound healthy. What matters is whether the routine lowers hidden sugar, fits your breakfast, and gives you something you can repeat on an ordinary Tuesday. That is the standard. Not hype, not fear, and not internet certainty. Just something practical enough to test, something clear enough to follow, measured enough to evaluate, and realistic enough to keep. Now, before I show you the best way to set this up, let's bring the most useful part forward: the 4 mistakes people make with coffee and milk. Mistake number 1, the wrong milk. A lot of people think they are just adding a little milk, when what they are really adding is sweetened almond milk, flavored oat milk, vanilla soy milk, coffee creamer, or regular milk, in a portion big enough to push the carbohydrate load higher than they realize. If the drink already carries extra sugar, before breakfast even starts, you are asking your body to do more work before the meal has properly begun. Diabetes guidance consistently emphasizes planning what, when, and how much you eat and drink, because those details shape glucose control over time. Mistake number 2, drinking it with breakfast instead of before breakfast. If you sip the coffee and milk mixture while eating toast, cereal, oatmeal, pancakes, or fruit, you lose much of the point of using it as a preload. The broader research on pre-meal protein is about what happens before the carbohydrate load arrives, not halfway through it. Mistake number 3, never measuring anything. This is where just a little milk quietly becomes half a mug. You do not need obsession. You need honesty. A routine cannot be improved if it stays vague. Mistake number 4, never testing your own response. This is the mistake that keeps people stuck for years. They copy strangers, trust dramatic claims, and argue online, but they never compare their usual routine with a cleaner version. Your meter will often tell a very different story than your assumptions. Now, once you see those 4 mistakes, the whole topic becomes easier to understand, because the goal is not to prove that coffee with milk is universally good or universally bad. The goal is to build a version that gives you a fair test. So, let's go back to the part most people miss. Where does that breakfast spike really begin? Most people imagine the problem starting in the bloodstream, but the story starts earlier, in the gut. Breakfast carbohydrates are broken down and absorbed through the small intestine, and the speed of that process affects how quickly glucose rises after the meal. That is exactly why protein before carbohydrate strategies are studied in type 2 diabetes. They help slow gastric emptying and blunt the post-meal glucose rise. In a meaningful number of people, that point matters, because what we are talking about here is not magic. It is not one miracle coffee trick. It is a practical version of a bigger principle. Food order, drink composition, and meal timing matter. The cup is not acting alone. The cup is influencing what happens next. And that is why the milk first idea is still useful, even when people oversell it. The strongest evidence supports the bigger protein preload principle. The dramatic claim that one pouring order always cuts your spike by a fixed percentage goes further than the evidence. But milk first still helps, because it changes behavior in a useful way. It makes you portion the milk, choose the milk deliberately, slow down the routine, and set the drink up as something before breakfast, rather than something you mindlessly sip during the meal. That is how I want you to think about it. Milk first is not a glucose trick. It is a structure that helps you do the rest of the routine correctly. Margaret's first issue was not coffee. It was that her method was automatic. Coffee first, cold milk after. Drink it with breakfast. No measuring, no testing against another version. That is how habits hide from us. They do not look like a problem, because they feel familiar. So I had her simplify everything. Instead of treating the cup like an afterthought, she measured the milk. She switched to an unsweetened option. She drank it before breakfast, instead of during breakfast. And most importantly, she compared her numbers with her old pattern, instead of guessing. That is how you turn a health claim into a useful experiment. Now let's talk about the milk itself, because this part matters more than many people expect. If your main goal is to reduce the carbohydrate load in the cup, unsweetened options make the most sense. Unsweetened almond milk is often the simplest place to start, because it is low in carbohydrate and easy to find. Unsweetened soy milk is also a strong option, and it provides more protein. Unsweetened oat milk is usually higher in carbohydrate than almond milk, so it is not my first choice for someone specifically trying to calm breakfast numbers. Sweetened plant milks, flavored creamers, and dessert-style add-ins quietly undo the purpose of the routine. And here is the practical lesson most people miss. The label matters more than the front of the carton. Take 10 seconds and check 3 things: serving size, total sugar or added sugar, and the ingredient list. If the carton says vanilla, sweetened, or barista with extra syrups, that is your signal to slow down. The label tells the truth long before the marketing does. Diabetes guidance encourages people to plan meals and pay attention to how much they eat and drink, and this kind of label check is one of the easiest habits to build. Now here is the next question people always ask. Does milk really need to go in first? Here is the honest answer. The evidence is stronger for the broader principle than for the theatrical version of the claim. But the milk first method still has value because it forces intention. When people pour the milk first, they usually measure it. They usually keep the amount reasonable. They usually think about whether it is unsweetened, and they are less likely to turn the cup into a hidden sugary breakfast on its own. James, who was 67, liked that explanation because it sounded practical instead of mystical. He stopped treating the cup like something random. He poured a measured amount of unsweetened milk first, added coffee after it had cooled slightly, and drank it before breakfast instead of during the meal. Then he compared that pattern with his usual routine. That last step matters. People want belief. What they actually need is feedback. And if your result is not better, that information still helps you. It means the breakfast itself is the bigger problem. The portion is too large, or your medication timing, poor sleep, stress, or insulin resistance is driving more of the pattern than the drink. A reading that disappoints you is not failure. It is direction. Now I do want to keep one kidney point in this video, but only one, because the main subject here is still the coffee routine. Diabetes is a leading cause of chronic kidney disease, and kidney problems are often silent early on, which is one reason better glucose management matters. Beyond the breakfast table, if a morning routine helps you keep your numbers steadier over time, that matters for more than one cup of coffee. That is why steady mornings matter medically, not just emotionally, for years. Now, let me tighten the method even further. If you want the cleanest version of this routine, start with an unsweetened milk. Pour a measured amount into the cup first. Around 1/3 of the cup is a practical starting point for many people. Then brew the coffee and let it cool briefly. I do not say that because I believe there is one magical temperature that fixes blood sugar. I say it because a slightly cooler drink is easier to sip slowly, easier to mix deliberately, and less likely to turn into an autopilot rush. Then add the coffee gradually. Again, not because I think there is one perfect laboratory sequence hidden inside 3 pores, but because gradual preparation forces attention. Attention is what most people lost years ago. After that, drink it about 15 to 20 minutes before breakfast, if that timing is safe for you and fits your medication plan. The pre-meal timing is what connects the routine to the broader protein preload idea. But context matters. If you use insulin or medicines that can cause low blood sugar, or if you have other medical issues that affect meal timing, this should fit your personal plan, not fight against it. Good diabetes care always emphasizes individualized decisions and adjusting recommendations to comorbidities and person-specific factors. And please remember this part. The drink does not cancel out the breakfast. If breakfast is still a heavy load of refined carbohydrate, the cup is not going to rescue it. This is where people get misled. They want one protective item. Real life rarely works that way. That is why I kept only one more case for this video. William was 70 and had spent years avoiding coffee with milk because he had been told it was simply bad for diabetes. Meanwhile, he still disliked his mornings, and his glucose control was not where he wanted it. When he finally tested a measured, unsweetened, pre-breakfast version against his usual routine, what changed most was not just the drink. The whole breakfast pattern became more deliberate. He was no longer reacting. He was choosing. That shift is bigger than people realize. There is also an emotional side to this. When people start to believe diabetes means losing every familiar pleasure, burnout follows. But when a routine becomes testably, flexible, and measurable, confidence comes back. And confidence is what keeps a better habit going. Now let me give you the 8-second tip I promised at the beginning. After your final pour, wait 8 seconds before your first sip. That is it. And no, it is not a glucose trick. It is a consistency trigger. Those 8 seconds create a small pause between autopilot and intention. In that pause, ask yourself 4 fast questions. Did I choose an unsweetened milk? Did I measure it instead of guessing? Am I drinking this before breakfast, not during it? And what is breakfast actually going to look like today? That is why this tip works. Not because 8 seconds has magical chemistry, because 8 seconds is just long enough to interrupt the old routine before it takes over. And when people interrupt autopilot, they often make a better decision for the next 10 minutes too. They choose a better breakfast, they slow down, they remember to test, and they stop treating health like something that only happens at the doctor's office. That is the real payoff. The pause is small, but the effect on consistency is immediate, practical, and repeatable. So, here is the full protocol in one clean run. Choose an unsweetened milk. Pour the milk first. Add the coffee. After it cools briefly, mix it gradually. Pause for 8 seconds before the first sip. Drink it before breakfast, when appropriate. Then test 1 hour and 2 hours after the meal. Compare that with your old routine. Keep what helps. Drop what does not. That is a much more honest promise than saying one pouring order fixes everything. If this gave you a simpler way to think about your mornings, comment steady. One word. That is all. It is the right final word for this video, because the real goal here is not coffee perfection. It is steadier mornings you can actually repeat. And please share this with someone your age, a spouse, a sibling, or a friend who still thinks they only have 2 options: black coffee they hate, or coffee with milk that works against them. Sometimes the most useful help is not dramatic. It is just clear enough to use tomorrow. You do not need a perfect morning. You need a pattern you can understand, test, and trust over time. And if that pattern helps you protect your glucose control more consistently, that matters far beyond 1 cup of coffee. I'm Dr. Thomas Bennett. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next video.